Welcome to Mythos AI, your source for Cliff's Notes on complex subjects. Join Anna and Phil for yet another engaging conversation.
It's April 2025. President Trump is in his second term, and we find ourselves compelled to look back, to examine the unsettling parallels between the psychological forces at play in America today and those that smoothed the path for the Nazi regime in pre-war Germany.
It's a difficult comparison, obviously, but a necessary one if we want to understand the dynamics at work.
Absolutely. We're undertaking a deep dive today into how very human vulnerabilities, things like fear, the deep need for order, for belonging, the way we defend our own sense of identity, even cognitive dissonance, how these things can contribute to the normalization of political realities that might have once seemed unthinkable.
And we're tracing these mechanisms observable both in history and right now to see how they can wear away at democratic norms, often subtly, incrementally.
The key thing, it seems, is how these basic human psychological needs can be manipulated, channeled even, to foster acceptance of profoundly undemocratic situations.
Exactly. The rise of the Nazis wasn't just about brute force. It relied heavily on persuading ordinary people, exploiting those deep psychological needs we all share. Their consent, or at least their quiet acceptance, was crucial.
Let's start with a pivotal moment in Germany. The Enabling Act of March 1933. This wasn't just any law.
No, it was fundamental. It essentially granted Adolf Hitler dictatorial powers. His government could make laws without parliamentary approval, even laws that violated the Weimar Constitution.
And the timing is critical, isn't it? Right after the Reichstag fire decree, which had already suspended basic civil liberties, political opponents were being intimidated, arrested.
The atmosphere was one of manufactured crisis and fear, absolutely. Yet the psychological acceptance went beyond just fear. You have to remember the context. The chaos and instability of the Weimar Republic.
People were desperate for order.
Desperate. There was a profound yearning for stability, for a strong hand after years of economic hardship and political turmoil. Hitler presented himself as that decisive leader, the one who could fix things.
And the framing of the act itself. Law to remedy the distress of the people and the Reich? It sounds almost helpful.
Precisely. It's masterful propaganda. It reframed dictatorship not as dismantling democracy, but as a necessary, temporary measure to deal with a national emergency. It appealed directly to patriotism.
So it played on that desire for order and safety.
And crucially, there was the appearance of legality. Despite the coercion, the Reichstag did vote on it. They achieved the two-thirds majority needed, even though many opponents were intimidated or absent.
That procedural fig leaf, however compromised, was important psychologically.
Immensely important. It gave citizens and institutions like the courts a way to see it as legitimate. Most judges, steeped in a tradition of serving the state, continued to view Hitler's government as the lawful authority.
It provided a rationale, a way to avoid confronting the reality of what was happening.
Exactly. It's that veneer of legality. It allowed people to normalize a radical seizure of power.
It reminds me of what Milton Mayer wrote about in They Thought They Were Free, those little measures.
Yes, it fits perfectly. The Enabling Act was a huge step, but presented as just one necessary measure in a crisis. It was part of that gradual process, acclimating people to authoritarian rule step by step.
And you mentioned the deference to authority in Germany at the time. That must have played a role, too.
A significant role. There was a deeply ingrained respect for the state, cultivated through schools, youth groups. Challenging the government, even as it became dictatorial, felt almost unthinkable for many. Compliance seemed safer, more normal.
So the appearance of legality acted as a kind of psychological shield. People could focus on the procedure, not the substance.
Correct. That, combined with the appeals to order and the inherent respect for authority, was key to normalizing what was essentially the establishment of a dictatorship.
Let's shift to another powerful concept the Nazis used, the Volksgemeinschaft, the people's community.
Ah, yes. This was central to their ideology. A vision of a racially pure, harmonious nation, all united behind the Führer, transcending old class and social divisions.
And they built a massive infrastructure to promote this, didn't they? Organizations like the Hitler Youth.
Pervasive organizations. They were designed to indoctrinate everyone, constantly fostering this sense of connection, of belonging to something larger than oneself.
What was the appeal? Especially after the humiliation of World War I and the economic struggles?
The appeal was powerful. It offered excitement, camaraderie, a feeling of empowerment. It gave people, especially young people, a sense of purpose and identity in a time of national crisis.
And it was built on this idea of racial superiority, the collective over the individual. You are nothing. Your people, everything.
That slogan captures it perfectly. And this ideology wasn't just suggested, it was hammered home relentlessly through propaganda, mass rallies, symbols, songs, huge public spectacles. Goebbels wanted Nazism to be inescapable.
But this community, this Volksgemeinschaft, it wasn't just about who was in, was it?
No. Critically, it was defined by who was out. The vision of a racially pure community required identifying and excluding community aliens, Jews, communists, Roma, homosexuals, the disabled, anyone deemed an enemy or unfit.
So accepting the community meant accepting the persecution of these groups.
Often, yes. Implicitly or explicitly,
Right.
membership and its benefits were tied to the exclusion of others.
The historian Robert DeLately argued that many Germans weren't just passive bystanders.
He argued they were often proud and pleased to see these groups removed. They saw it as cleaning house, restoring order, strengthening the nation.
That's a deeply disturbing idea, that the benefits of inclusion were directly linked to complicity and exclusion.
It created a terrible dynamic. Social pressure was immense. Non-participation could look like disloyalty, which was dangerous. We see in diaries from the time people consciously trying to align their thoughts with the regime, watching others for signs of conformity or dissent.
So the very act of seeking belonging, security, and purpose within the Volksgemeinschaft could lead directly to complicity and persecution.
It became almost a natural consequence of wanting to be part of the in-group. The reward of inclusion was predicated on the othering and removal of the excluded.
Now let's bring this forward to April 2025. We're seeing an unwavering loyalty within the MAGA movement towards President Trump, despite numerous controversies. Does this reflect similar psychological dynamics?
There are, I think, undeniable parallels in the psychological mechanisms at play. This intense loyalty seems deeply connected to identity, and it's sustained by powerful defenses against cognitive dissonance. Allegiance to the leader often seems to override everything else.
Take the persistent belief in the fraudulent nature of the 2020 election. Even now, in 2025, after Trump's 2024 victory, it remains a core tenet for many supporters.
Yes, despite all the court cases, recounts, investigations finding no widespread fraud that would have changed the 2020 outcome, the belief persists. It's less about evidence at this point and more about, well, identity.
It functions as a marker of belonging.
Absolutely. For a large segment of Republicans, loyalty to Trump has become the defining feature of their political identity, sometimes overshadowing traditional conservative principles. The election fraud narrative acts as a crucial loyalty test. Questioning it means signaling disloyalty to the leader and the group.
And the media environment plays a role here.
A massive role. Supporters often exist in curated media ecosystems, certain news channels, social media feeds, online forums, where the stolen election narrative is constantly repeated, validated, amplified.
So anything contradicting it is just dismissed.
Dismissed as fake news, as propaganda from a hostile elite or the deep state. This constant repetition creates what psychologists call the illusory truth effect. Something feels true just because you hear it so often.
And there's a profound distrust of mainstream institutions alongside this.
A very deep distrust of media, government agencies, academia, sometimes even the courts if they rule against Trump's interests. They're seen as inherently corrupt and biased.
Emotionally, the stolen election narrative clearly resonates.
It taps into powerful feelings, grievance, a sense of cultural displacement, anger, resentment. It offers a simple explanation for complex anxieties.
Some studies link this belief to other attitudes as well.
Yes, research has suggested links between racial anxieties, concerns about demographic change, and the belief in widespread voter fraud. It seems to channel multiple undercurrents.
So asserting election fraud becomes less about facts and more about performance.
It functions as a performative act of allegiance. It signals unwavering commitment to the tribe, to the leader. It reinforces the boundaries between us and them. It's about loyalty, not empirical verification.
Looking at Trump's second-term actions since January 2025, the pardons for January 6 participants, ethical questions, appointments based on loyalty, rhetoric that seems to push legal boundaries. How do supporters defend these?
Well, polling generally shows broad approval among his core base. But some actions, like the January 6 pardons, do get more mixed reactions even within his coalition. The defense often reveals these potent psychological forces.
Such as identity fusion.
Exactly. This is where supporters feel such a deep, almost personal connection with the leader, that any attack on him feels like a personal attack on them. It triggers a strong defensive reaction.
Does this fusion have real-world consequences?
Research suggests it does. Higher identity fusion with Trump has been linked to viewing political opponents as existential threats and being more willing to support authoritarian measures against them. It bypasses rational cost-benefit analysis.
And then there's the sunk cost fallacy.
Right. People have invested so much time, emotion, social identity in supporting Trump. Admitting he's done something deeply wrong or that their judgment was flawed is psychologically very difficult.
It's easier to double down.
Much easier than confronting the possibility that your investment was misguided. Defending him becomes a way to protect your past decisions, to maintain consistency.
Shame avoidance also seems relevant here.
A powerful motivator. Reversing course could lead to feeling ashamed, being ridiculed by outsiders. Trump himself often uses shame against opponents while promising pride to followers. Loyalty becomes a shield against that shame, reinforcing a positive self-image tied to the group.
So how do they rationalize specific actions?
Through various strategies, reframing actions as necessary battles against the deep state, highlighting fulfilled promises, downplaying criticisms as unimportant or just partisan attacks, dismissing negative reports as biased lies.
It seems for many the loyalty is primarily personal to Trump himself, rather than strictly ideological.
That appears to be a key factor in 2025. It's an effective, identity-based loyalty. This allows supporters to justify actions that might even conflict with their own previously stated values or traditional conservative principles. The bond with the leader transcends policy specifics.
All of this really highlights Leon Festinger's theory of cognitive dissonance, doesn't it? That internal conflict when our beliefs and actions don't line up.
Precisely. We all strive for internal consistency. When we hold conflicting beliefs or when our actions contradict our beliefs, it creates this uncomfortable mental state dissonance, and we're highly motivated to reduce it.
So for a committed supporter, challenging the leader or the movement creates intense dissonance.
Extremely intense. It forces you to confront your past choices, your judgments, maybe even your complicity. Admitting the leader is wrong can feel like admitting you were foolish or morally compromised.
So defending the leader is really defending yourself.
In a profound psychological sense, yes. It protects your self-concept, your sense of being rational and good. We saw this after WWII mayors' interviews showed Germans justifying their past acceptance by focusing on perceived benefits or blaming scapegoats. Diaries revealed people actively trying to persuade themselves to align with the regime.
Rationalizations focused on the greater good helped reduce the dissonance caused by lost freedoms or persecution.
Yes, focusing on national revival, fighting communism, restoring order, these narratives helped manage the discomfort.
And in the MAGA context, actions like voting for Trump are behavioral commitments. So contradictory information creates dissonance.
Definitely. And the strategies to reduce it are similar. Dismiss the info as fake news, trivialize it, it doesn't matter, everyone does it. Find external justifications, he has to fight dirty against the deep state. Or, crucially, change your own attitude to match the leader's actions.
So supporting Trump becomes a defense against admitting you might have been wrong.
That's a core part of the dynamic for many.
It's interesting to compare the content of the rationalizations, though.
Right. In Germany, justifications often invoked grand narratives. National destiny, racial purity, fighting existential enemies like Jews or communists. MAGA justifications often seem more focused on personal loyalty to Trump, fighting the deep state, restoring a perceived lost American identity, expressing grievance.
But the underlying psychological function is the same.
Yes, fundamentally. Both sets of rationalizations serve to reduce cognitive dissonance and preserve the individual's self-concept.
And this individual drive to reduce dissonance fuels wider societal polarization.
It absolutely does. When you seek out confirming information and avoid contradictory facts, selective exposure, you naturally end up in echo chambers.
And to maintain your beliefs against challenge, you have to attack the credibility of opposing sources and the people who trust them.
Exactly. Defending your group often means amplifying negative views of the other side. Multiply that across millions, and you get hardened boundaries, eroding shared reality, and this deep, effective polarization where the other side isn't just wrong, they're perceived as bad or dangerous.
Which brings us to the question of collapse. When do these powerful belief systems break down? Germany after WWII is one model.
A model of collapse triggered by overwhelming, undeniable catastrophe. total military defeat, devastation, occupation, forced confrontation with the Holocaust. The Nazi pseudo-reality just couldn't survive that level of brutal external contradiction.
The truth became unbearable, unavoidable. It led to disillusionment, shame.
A complex, painful national reckoning. But the MAGA movement in 2025 seems remarkably resilient. Why the difference?
The media landscape is one huge factor, surely.
Undeniably. The fragmented media allows people to stay cocooned in reinforcing narratives.
Yeah.
There's no single authoritative counter-narrative like the Allied victory and denazification.
And the intense polarization means negative information is easily dismissed?
Preemptively dismissed as partisan attacks, fake news. The identity fusion also acts as a powerful emotional anchor, making disillusionment feel like a personal betrayal.
Also, as of now, in early 2025, there hasn't been a single universally acknowledged disaster on the scale of 1945 Germany that's directly attributable to the movement in the eyes of its followers.
Right. Setbacks can be rationalized, blamed on enemies. The populist nature allows for adaptation, reframing contradictions. It's built around grievance and anti-elitism, which is flexible.
So what could be a collapse point today? A severe recession, a major policy disaster, legal consequences for leadership, escalating authoritarianism.
It's the crucial question. Or have the psychological defenses, the echo chambers, the fusion, the deep distrust of outside sources made the movement almost impervious to reality checks unless they come from within trusted sources?
Maybe a sudden collapse is less likely than a slow erosion or even further entrenchment.
That seems possible. The German experience suggests you need an external force to shatter the reality framework. In today's information environment, maybe that trigger needs to be much more personal, more pervasive, or truly catastrophic to break through.
The unbearable truth might just remain bearable as long as the psychological and social structures supporting denial hold up.
And that's the deeply unsettling possibility. These parallels between pre-war Germany and contemporary America aren't about saying they are identical, they're not, but they are a stark reminder of how susceptible human psychology is to authoritarian appeals.
The mechanisms we've discussed, rationalization, identity loyalty, cognitive dissonance reduction, these aren't relics of history. They are alive and shaping our present.
Understanding them isn't about drawing easy equivalences. It's about recognizing the fragility of democratic systems. It takes constant vigilance to resist simple narratives, the comfort of unwavering belief, especially when faced with difficult truths.
History shows us that systems can change, freedoms can erode, reality can be denied, often step by step while people adjust, wanting to believe they're right. The potential for that resides within all of us.
And the enduring question remains, what, if anything, will make the unbearable finally become undeniably so? And what role will our individual and collective psychology play when or if that moment arrives?
Thanks for listening to Mythos AI. Stay tuned for more concise insights. And remember to hit the like button and subscribe for future episodes.